Genesis Gardens reminds me of the beginning. Genesis. It's a joy to get out and feel good, feel the sunshine.
I think this garden is Bill's family, it's his children.
It's just a couple of miles off of the Interstate 40 north on Genesis Road, and a nice sign that says Genesis Gardens. I always feel very grateful, and I'm very disappointed if I don't have visitors. As you know, if you don't share something, it's of no value. Can I brag a little bit? I'm a one-man operation here, and it keeps me, I guess, fairly youthful at age 81. My name is Bill Pinkerton, a native Californian, southern part, which makes me a true Southerner for Tennessee. And my career began with the U.S. Army in 1963, drafted, and eventually went into the being a violinist with the United States Army Strings. Stationed permanently at Washington, D.C. Oh, here's a picture of our entire Strolling Strings group. Here's a nice state dinner picture at the White House with Nancy Reagan and the Prime Minister of Israel. And my military career was a 20-year time frame, and I retired in 1983, and that's a partial of the beginning of moving all of the azalea collections from my home in Virginia to Tennessee. I just completely retired, picked up a shovel, and traded my violin bow for a hoe. The percentage of survival when I transplanted plants from the collection, very few disappeared. At the time, I had at least 270 of the named Glendale hybrid azaleas successfully transplanted. And it was amazing to me, not knowing that crosswind can give you some real cold winters and cause loss of flower buds in the spring. That winter of '83, it was 16 below zero on Christmas Eve, and then the next year we had almost 30 below zero. And a lot of the Glendale azaleas were really smashed to the ground, but luckily they resprouted, and we've had some brutal colds in early time blooming too. One year we went to 16 degrees in the middle of April, and all the sap was rising. And I'm sure that growers are familiar with water freezing and splitting bark on rhododendrons and azaleas. And I'd like to add also that over the years, which would be over 38 years or more, it's been a tremendous test gardens to see what will survive in sometimes what we call rough weather. This azalea is one of our Glendale collection, and its name is Masquerade, and it's comparable for description due to the monograph 20 that the U.S. Department of Agriculture printed as the descriptive, accurate source for naming these plants. And this one happens to have a couple of variations, and a lot of azalea growers realize this. This is one of the variations, and the true Masquerade's name and description would be representative here, with the mostly white with a few stripes and flecks. Visitors in the garden ask about, whoa, did you graft this plant? And I'll try to explain. I'll say the first response is, no, this is grandpa or grandma showing up in the genetic factor in the breeding previously. The hardiness zone here, if you would count on the 20 minus 20, would be a zone 5 to a 5B. And I'd like to mention that after the almost 30 below zero in 1985, within the 20-year period from 1983 to present, we had, for the first 20 years, we had 5 winters where it was at least minus 20. In the last few years, we've only gone, our coldest this winter was 9 above. The previous winter was 12 above. But we ordinarily, what they call regular or normal, maybe -2, -5 in that area. And a lot of the Glendale azaleas are performing beautifully. The hybridizing efforts were minimal and very successful. For the people who understand names of what were used, this was Exberry Orange. One of the goals was to try to develop a yellow rhododendron that would be hardy for crossfill, and that was one of my efforts with crossbreeding. Crossed with an azalea from George Beasley years ago called C4C1, and it has what we called the Chop Tank series, and that's probably closely the total I've ever done with hybridizing. And successfully, I might add. We have a yellow rhododendron now that will live up here for the climate. It's just a very hardy, wonderful azalea for crossfill. I might mention also, for those who are not allergic to sunshine, gardening here with this huge garden with a shovel, leaning your left side to the sun continuously when you're digging trenches and water lines, after 25 years or 30 years, the sun was very grateful to me and gave me a squamous cell cancer on my left ear. I've learned my lesson concerning gardening in full sun or even moderate sun over the years due to my ear surgery, and it's my fault. I should have been wearing a nice hat cover and long sleeve shirts. I'd like to show you my one introduction, introduced at the National Azalea Convention in about 2004, I believe it was, and we named it after a lady that was walking through the garden admiring it, and it's named Clara Haler, and it's, I think, one of the nicer azaleas that one could grow. When visitors see this garden, some of the questions are, how should I plant my plant? But the real complaint is, why did my azalea die? I planted it right, I think. And why does my rhododendron die? And so that opens the door for me to ask them questions, and we sometimes get a little laugh when I give them the answer. I'll start with a little anecdotal. One lady, I said, well, how did you plant it? I said, I'll bet you that you dug a hole extra deep, didn't you? She says, yeah. And she says, you dug it down to the rocks. And I said, well, now, did you make it wide? Or, oh, yeah, I gave it a 1 gallon size plant. I gave it a 2-foot circle. And then I said, well, the next thing was, did you, what did you do? Did you put anything in there? She said, well, no, I didn't have to, because I just shoved the pot all the way down to the bottom, and then I backfilled on the top of it. And I said, well, lady, that's wonderful. I said, but the only question I have, only answer I can give you is, they put dead people in holes. And she laughed, but then I had to tell her how to do it. But the rule of thumb I had really is, if you're questioning your soil, if it's seemingly hard pan or clay or really heavy, go ahead and, I like to put a hole at least a foot deep, and then pour water in it and wait and see if it perks out, if it drains. And if it does really well, then okay, you can plant that a little deeper. But the real success rate I've had with crazy things was, I would remove a plant I didn't like and I just threw it out in the woods. It landed upright and sat just perfectly. Well, that season we had plenty of rain all summer long, and I went down there, and that azalea was just prospering like it had been dining on filet mignon or something. And it was, I mean, I was just amazed. And then I had an azalea that I just put right on top of the ground and put a stick through it and tied it so it wouldn't blow over. And all I did was kept it watered. It grew beautifully. So if people want to make sure about conditions, if you're in doubt, I like to make a little raised bed with some pieces of log or a stone or something, and then just loosen the soil about 3 or 4 or 5 inches deep, and just set the plant in there almost up, and then mound up to it. But the key, as I mentioned, is the watering. That's what really is the answer. And now, as far as soil amendments, in this area where we have nice sloping ground. We have good drainage, and I like to use the pine bark mini nuggets, and along with some of the pine bark fines and mix that in. I don't use peat moss for in the ground plantings. And you want a nice crumbly loose soil. Incidentally, you can grow a rhododendron or an azalea in pure fines pine bark if you keep it watered. Any new plantings, you must give them the same care they had where they were before, which means keep the watering at least for a good year. And if they need to eat and be really vigorous looking, you need to keep them that way. So I recommend give them a nice, good treatment. Now, they need to put out the roots, I agree. Root pruning helps them to push out roots more. But the watering is really, over the years, talking with people that have plants and problems, it's the watering situation. You must water whether it rains or not. Now, the old fellows like me know that, but young people say, well, it rained, we don't have to water. So there's the answer about care. And it's really simple, but you have to be dedicated to have a garden like this. This one is deciduous, as you can see, and we named it Chamelia instead of Camellia because it changes to 3 different tones of color, and the parentage is unknown, but it's a nice azalea, in my opinion. A little later blooming. And it's recommended if you could ever find one from Bill Pinkerton someday, if you want one. Seedlings have a way of, a few occasionally will grow under an azalea, but very rarely have I ever found a succeed that's dropped off of a plant that ever grew or sprouted. And layering is an answer. I found some layers sometimes, and that gives you an extra plant. But other than that, you more or less have to do the homework yourself. The plants don't do it. The pests we have are basically, we have an azalea branch dieback, Phomopsis, and it's treatable with fungicide. And I'd like to add, if you have a garden or with rhododendrons and azaleas, according to a few of the colleagues I have in the collecting, you must spray good fungicide, and then I try to do it twice, and one particular is the Triaspheria petal blight problem, and that can be controlled if you do the proper spraying. And then later in the summer we have the lace bug that hits azaleas. I could recommend a product for the insecticide. I like Orthene, and Orthene is, and also Orthene used to have a product incorporated with the fungicide, and it was called Orthonex, and I haven't been able to locate that. Now, other problems we have also are scale, and I'm thinking that the Orthene will take care of that systemically. And the spray I use now for the dieback on the azaleas is called Infuse. It's available. It's made by Bayer. It needs to be used about twice at least when the azaleas have nice new growth, and then later if it's hot and dry you need to use that fungicide again. The big one I really like to use for petal blight is called Trigon, and that's a new development from tridiamephon chemical, and previously it was called Balaton. It's quite expensive, but it's well worth the price. And I might mention also, this garden has to have 75 gallons of spray to cover.
Bill sort of took me under his wing and taught me how to propagate, how to grow, how to plant, how to see a garden, how to see what colors go together, to look at design points, vistas, and he taught me how to design an eye candy garden rather than just a row of plants. Bill at one time had a bit of a nursery here, and he was kind enough to sell me a few plants, and I had the notion to put 8 or 10 in a little wooded area in the curve of my driveway and naturalize it, and that be that. And now 1,200 plants later, it wasn't that at all.
The visitors I had this morning from Arkansas, Ronnie Palmer, and he's very well known on a lot of the connoisseurs, collectors over the years, and the chapter of Azalea Society chapter. And I was very sad when they left. They visited this one time, and it just gives you a boost to know that someone's going to carry on the project also.
Bill's become a dear friend. He's a mentor. He has shaped my own property at home. I can't say much more than he's just a dear friend.
I've had some very, very interesting visitors. I hope they come back and see again.